Welcome to I Am Refocused. Once again, we are here today and we have another amazing show lined up for y'all. We have our guest today, Dr. Erica Elliott. She is not just a physician, she is a healer, a mountaineer, a former Peace Corps volunteer, and woman whose life reads like a mythic journey. She has something that we're going to be talking about later in the show, is her memoir, From Mountains to Medicine, but she has a previous book that we'll also learn about. But before we get into that, let me tell a little bit more about what she does. Her personal story is a roadmap for anyone searching for meaning. And you know how it is sometimes. We live in a chaotic world and we need some extra help. In her own words, every life-changing experience has enriched me and prepared me for from fulfilling my ultimate destiny. So without further ado, landing the plane here. We're going to get to our guest right now. So once again, I want to say to you, Dr. Erica Elliott, thank you for being on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm very happy to be here with you.
I appreciate you being on. When you think about your experience with your memoir that I mentioned moments ago, you know how life can just come out of nowhere and give you curveballs. When you think about some of the things you've been through, kind of share with us some of the things that you learned from your own experience, especially with your mountain trips and those things.
Okay, well, it started out me thinking as a little girl that there was a purpose to my life, but I didn't know what it was. I thought there's more to life than just going to school and coming home and watching TV and eating dinner and go to bed. And but I didn't talk about it because I thought people would think I'm some kind of nerd talking about purpose in life. And so I kept it to myself. But I had a strong feeling that I'm here for something, and I didn't know what it was. And it took a long journey for me to find out what it was. But first I had to find out who I was. And so I had a very harsh upbringing. My father was a general in the army. He wasn't the harsh person, but he was gone all the time. And my mother was Swiss and raised us in the old style where you hit and slap and say, this is for your own good. And so I had a very distorted view of myself. It didn't match what my teachers were saying, how, wonderful and kind and smart I was. And the impression I had from my family was that I was no good, never good enough. I think all my sisters and brothers had the same impression of themselves. And so when I finished high school in Germany, because we lived all over the world because of my father's work, I didn't know what college to go to. And so I just sort of winged it and picked this college that sounded very interesting. And it was in 1966. And when I came to America at the end of high school and went to this college, I was in such shock because people spoke in a weird way. It was like hippies, and I didn't understand all the lingo, and they dressed really weird. And they took drugs and stuff like that. And so I did what I always did when we moved around to do. I tried to learn the language, meaning learn hippie talk, and dress like the people and do what they did. And so I did that. And I tried out drugs and all that stuff and had a complete psychotic break because I'm not, that's not how I'm wired. And so I made a suicide attempt. And that sounds pretty awful, but it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And that's the story of my life. All these terrible things end up being a portal to some huge transformation. So here's what happened. I sat in front of, I felt like my life was worthless and I couldn't think right because all these influence of drugs and stuff. So I sat in front of a stove, turned on the gas, and nothing happened. So I lit a match and the whole place blew up. I was blown out of the chair against the wall and I had burns and stuff. And the upstairs people came and threw me in the shower and they knew what I was trying to do. And they reported me to the dean. And the dean said I had to see a psychiatrist, which in those days only completely crazy people saw psychiatrists. And so the psychiatrist was this amazing Black man. He's the first Black psychiatrist to graduate from where my mother graduated, the University of Zurich in Switzerland. And so, wow. But I was so ashamed that I couldn't talk to him. He was very kind to me, but I looked at the floor and just cried. And he kept trying to get me to talk, and finally got up and he opened the door. He said, "You can go now, because you know, if you're not going to talk to me, there's no point in staying here." I said, "Well, I can't go because then they're going to tell my parents, because they said if I didn't see a psychiatrist, they were going to report me to my parents." And so I said, "Well, if I talk, can I stay?" And then did I talk. I mean, all this stuff came out, and he was the best psychiatrist I could ever imagine anybody having. He never told me what to do, and he never gave me pills. He treated me with huge respect, and it was the first time in my life that I felt seen and heard, the first time in my life. And so I could figure out my own problems. Just him holding that sacred space for me, I realized that I was smart, I wasn't stupid, and that I was really a good person. And I discovered who I really am. And I was really excited because it wasn't who I thought I was at all. And I was so thrilled. And that's when my real authentic life began. And it took off in a huge way. And so that's when I went to work for the Navajos as a school teacher, like in 1971, 2, and 3, and I learned to speak Navajo. So they opened up their whole world to me. I saw ceremonies that white people have never seen and never will see. I participated in peyote ceremonies and saw true miracles, and I don't use that word lightly, true miracles. And that's how I learned to speak Navajo, by the way, is in the peyote ceremonies. All of a sudden, I could speak Navajo. So how do you explain that? I can't explain it. I guess you'd have to be some kind of quantum physicist to be able to explain some of these things. And so that was a life-changing thing. And what I learned from that experience was that I love to teach, and not just teach anything, not teach to teach. I love to teach things that would empower people. These 4th grade students had been treated very badly by the white teachers who thought they were stupid. They weren't stupid at all. They were incredibly smart. It's just they knew that these teachers didn't care about them, and they gave them stupid books like Dick and Jane that they couldn't relate to. And so when I learned their language, and which was really hard, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I'm linguistic, but I never had a language like that. It was like Chinese or something. And then they really opened up, and I could see how they wanted to learn. They learned so fast. When I came there, they hardly spoke any English, and they're in the 4th grade. And by the end of the first year, 3 of my students won a speech contest, a regional speech contest. I mean, I discovered so much about myself that I'm an educator, that whatever I end up doing in life, it has to be something that educates, that informs, that helps the person in some way. And it has to be given with love. And so it was so profound what I learned. And then when I joined the Peace Corps, see, this 10-year odyssey before I realized that medicine was my calling, I learned all these things that helped me eventually be a better doctor. And so I knew I was heading in the right direction, but I still hadn't figured out that it was medicine, even though I come from a whole lineage of doctors in Switzerland. Why didn't I realize that this was in my DNA and this is what I should be doing? I think it's because I wanted to find my own path. Well, it happened to lead exactly where my lineage led. And so, but it took me 10 years to get there, and 10 wonderful years that made me a better doctor. So what I learned climbing big mountains, I joined an all-male climbing club in South America. They allowed me because they thought American women weren't real women because we didn't have a man with us all the time. We wore pants and we were very independent. And so they didn't know how to categorize me. So they just said, okay, I could join them. And so, so I learned a lot climbing mountains. I learned how to overcome fear. I learned how to take one step at a time to reach the top. And I was the first American woman to climb the highest mountain in the Western Hemisphere, which is Aconcagua, 23,000 feet. And all the time I was teaching the native people about nutrition. And I was working on a bilingual book to help them learn Spanish. It was Spanish and Quechua. That's the language they speak. So it was a wonderful time. And then I came back to the States and I taught for Outward Bound. I was an instructor, and that was life-changing too, seeing how all these people really changed on these 23-day courses, like profound changes. And so anyway, I decided to get my master's degree in experiential education, and it wasn't very demanding. So I decided to take some science courses because at Antioch College, it was so crazy. I tested out of all my science requirements. So I wanted to get an updated science education. And so I signed up with all these young students, 10 years younger than me. And I discovered every one of them was in pre-med. And I had this false idea based on my uncle, who was a genius, a Swiss doctor, a genius. He was my only role model for a doctor. So I thought you had to be a genius to be a doctor. Well, it turns out all these students were pre-med students, and I was the only one that wasn't. And I thought, oh my God, they're not geniuses at all. They're just memorizing. And I thought, I can do that. And so then I went to the admissions counselor, and I said, I think I found what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'd like to be a doctor, and what are all the steps I need to take? And he said, look, I want to give you some advice. I think you should go into being a professor at a university. I said, why? And he said, well, you know, I've looked at all your, it's very impressive, your folder, but you're too old for one thing. I was 29 when I was talking to him. I mean, these are the old days. It's not like that anymore. And number two, you're a woman. I said, what does that have to do with it? Well, it's harder to get in as a woman in those days. Number three, he said, you don't have any money. You were in the Peace Corps, and it's very expensive, and you'd have to get a huge loan to pay it off. And I said, anything else? And he said, well, you didn't have any science background. I said, because I tested out of all the things. I had a good education in Germany. And so then I broke all the rules. I prematurely applied to med school because he said I was so old. So I thought I have to hurry up. And so, but I got a letter requesting an interview from Stanford, and I went to show the advisor, and he said, well, I'm sorry. I thought I was giving you good advice. Anyway, Stanford wanted me because they said they were looking for 1% of their student population that was, quote, out of the box. I guess I'm out of the box. And I discovered I really am out of the box, because when I ended up going to University of Colorado because they paid for my whole thing. And so I was so eager to learn all the stuff. The first 2 years, at anatomy and physiology and all that stuff, I just couldn't get enough of it. I was so excited and everything, but gradually I smelled a rat. Something wasn't right in the next years. We were learning stuff that I knew wasn't right, like saturated fats cause heart disease. I knew that wasn't right because I lived with all these people back in the days before junk food who lived on saturated fats, like the Navajo people back then. Everything's changed now. It's not like that anymore with the junk food, but they were slim, strong. Nobody had heart disease or strokes, and they rode horses until they were 95 or something. And And then when I lived in Europe, when the rate of heart disease was way lower in Europe, this was a long time ago, they ate tons of cream and butter and all that stuff. So I knew something is wrong, but I didn't have all the data. And fast forward many years ahead, we discovered that all the lies that were given to us by corporations, like the sugar industry in the 70s, they were so afraid because the hippies, quote, the hippies were telling everybody not to eat sugar, that it caused heart disease. And so they did something very sinister. This, you can look it up yourself in the New York Times in 2016. I guess it took that long to tell the truth. Maybe they were afraid of getting shot or something if they tell the truth. I'm just kidding. But anyway, so they paid 3 Harvard researchers to lie and make up fake research that other research is built on, showing that it was fat that caused heart disease. Well, back then we didn't know the difference between good fat and bad fat. And like bad fat can, yes, cause heart disease, but good fats are extremely beneficial for you, like butter and coconut oil and duck tallow and so forth, and ghee and all that stuff. And then they told us to eat margarine, hydrogenated fat. I thought, this is a crazy world. I'm learning stuff that's crazy. They're telling us not to eat butter and to eat some fake butter called margarine, which later was determined to cause heart disease. So I lived with what's known as cognitive dissonance. And being an athlete, I wanted to be at the top of my class. That's sort of the athlete in me. But in order to do that, I had to betray my soul and go along with all this stuff that I knew wasn't true in order to, be part of the herd and be accepted and not rejected. And they called people who really in my heart they called them quacks. And so I didn't want to be a quack, And so anyway, so it was really rough. And then when I became a single mother, I did something that really betrayed my soul. I joined corporate medicine because I couldn't deliver babies all night. I had a baby. And so I had to be there for him and go home at 5 and make a decent income and not work on the weekends so I could be a real mother to my baby. And so corporate medicine was awful. You had 15 minutes or half an hour if it's a new patient, 15 minutes to order a lot of tests and then just give a pill for everything that's wrong with you. I thought, this is disgusting. But I didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to be called a quack for thinking for myself and doing things that really worked and looking for the underlying reason of why they're sick. I couldn't do any of that. It was awful. I felt like a complete robot. And then a disaster happened. And just like the disaster in college, this disaster saved me. So what happened was, this was a brand new building. They full of toxic chemicals. Once a month, I felt like I had the flu, and I found out from the janitors that their pesticide schedule coincided with my diary or journal of when I felt like I had the flu. And I was getting sicker and sicker, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know environmental medicine. Now I'm an expert. People come from all over the country to help me figure out their medical mysteries, which I love doing. And But I didn't know all that stuff. But I was here. I'm a world-class athlete, and I'm so tired all the time, full of rashes, and my balance is off, and pretty soon my thinking's off, and I don't know what to do, and it's getting worse and worse. And finally, this patient comes in, and the exam rooms are no windows, and it's a small cubicle. And he sits there and he's rambling, and my brain is so scrambled I can't follow what he's saying. And all of a sudden he stops and he looks right in my eyes and he says, "Dr. Elliott, are you all right?" And then all of a sudden I couldn't hold it in anymore, and I just put my head down and cried. And he came and sat next to me and put his arm around me. He said, Dr. Elliott, tell me what's wrong. And I said, I don't know. I think I'm dying. I can't think anymore. And my eyes are blurry. And I listed all these things. And he said, I know what's wrong with you. And I said, what's wrong with me? And he said, you've got sick building syndrome. And I said, what's that? And he said, this building is toxic. And I said, what do you mean toxic? This was back when people didn't know that stuff, back in 1991, 2, and 3. And I said, how do you know it's toxic? He said, whenever I come in for our appointments, I feel horrible. I get a scratchy throat, my nose runs, my eyes burn, I get a headache, and I can't think straight. You need to get out of here. And I said, but I can't, because I have to support my son and blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, you can stay here and just die, or become totally incapacitated and be disabled the rest of your life. And if you don't leave, I'm going to tell your supervisor. And I said, oh, how could you do something like that? He said, have you ever heard of an intervention? I'm doing an intervention. I'm trying to save you. And so the next person who came in had so much perfume on. I had no idea what she was saying. It was so toxic. And that's when I realized, okay, I got to get out of here. So I thought, my life is over. Who'd ever want to hire me? I'm a wreck. I'm sensitive now to everything. What am I going to do? I lay on the couch and cried. And then someone knocked on the door 3 days later and asked me if I could have an appointment with her. I said, well, I was so confused. What do you mean? And she said, well, I was your patient at the multi-specialty clinic. I can't say the name. I'll be sued. And I really liked you. And I said, but I can't see anybody. I've got brain damage. She said, I know. The nurse told us all about what happened to you, but I have the same thing you have. So could I come into your home and have an appointment? I thought, oh, wow, this is so weird. And so she came in and she talked and talked, and I made eye contact and tried to look like I was really following her, saying, But, I could understand each word. I couldn't string them together. It's like learning Greek. And all of a sudden she said, are we done? And I said, well, are you done? She said, yes. How much do I owe you? I said, I didn't do anything. You don't owe me anything. She said, Dr. Elliott, you don't understand. You are the first doctor that's ever listened to me and taken me seriously and understands me. And I'm going to tell my friends about you. And so anyway, I was so honest with everybody. I told everybody that I'm brain damaged and I act like I'm demented, and they still kept coming. And gradually I got better enough so I could learn environmental medicine. And I eventually got board certified. And I was, after 5 years, I was like really healthy, and I had more patients than I could handle. They were all desperate to get not only seen and heard, but just get some advice. And gradually I had real things to offer them. And that's when people started coming from all over the country. And then it wasn't just environmental issues. Pretty soon it was just anything that their doctor couldn't figure out. And like, I remember one patient, who wealthy businessman from San Francisco, he'd been to 15 doctors trying to find out what was wrong with him. His mother told him about this person in Santa Fe, which is me. So he came out here. I figured out what he had in 10 minutes. And it's not because I'm a genius. It's because our medical system it is really messed up for chronic conditions. It's great for surgeries. It's great for trauma. But anyway, what's my secret? How did I figure it out? I talked to him, and I had a timeline. When were you fine? And then when were you not fine? And he said, well, in winter of 2016, I started feeling bad. And I said, well, did you ever have times where you felt good? And he said, yeah, I went camping for 2 weeks in Alaska and I felt great. And I said, what happened when you came back? I felt terrible. I said, it's your house. Okay, let's go over it. There's 3 main things in the house that can cause problems. 1 is a gas leak. 2 is full of toxins, like you put pesticides in your house and stuff like that. 3 is mold. And I said, let's start with mold. Is there any evidence of water damage in the place you're renting? He said, how would I know that? And I said, well, there'll be stains on the wall, buckling of the paint, around the windows, there'll be some discoloration. He said, oh, it's full of that. I said, you have mycotoxin poisoning. Those are poisons made by the spores of the mold, and they're neurotoxic, like any toxic chemical, damage your nervous system. You need to get out now, and then we'll make a plan of how you can get well. And so that's anyway, I love my work, and people say, when will you retire? I say, never. I love helping people, empower them with knowledge, and helping them feel good brings me enormous joy.
Once again, you've been listening to I Am Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, and Dr. Elliott. I want to say I'm glad I let you take the floor, because I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna ask another question, because what you gave was a series of stories, and these stories, I think, are very helpful for anyone who listens or watches, because what I got from all that is, even though life gave you, a lot of surprises and detours, you still navigated your way through it, and it still positioned you to help and serve other people. I love the parts where you're outside the box, according to people. I think sometimes that's the best place to be. You can be tied down to so much textbook study, things that, unless you're actually in the field, you really don't know what you think you know. It's good to have textbook type ideas and stuff, but the real work is when you're actually in the field, real life situations. Because last time I checked, when you're in the field, it's kind of hard to dig in your backpack and see, okay, A, B, C, what I have to do next. Sometimes you don't have the luxury and time to do that. You have to just do what is happening in the moment. And that's what I got from your story. And I think for you to be still recognized and respected as a professional doctor who is not just going for the pocketbook, but going for the heart, that's missing as well. There's not enough people in the professional world who listen to people into what is actually going on in their life. Sometimes it's just a rubber stamp and transactional next. But what we learned today, I'm sure our viewers and listeners will see that this is an example of what you can be as a professional. Actually listen to people's heart. You said it earlier in the story, when you needed help, the gentleman opened the door and said, you can leave now, but you chose to talk, and he chose to listen.
Yeah, he was, he saved me. He helped me begin my real life. He's a godsend, that man. And if I hadn't had a breakdown, I'd probably be some professor at a university and totally miserable, never finding my real, true, heartfelt calling in life.
If someone's listening to this right now, and obviously I always want to tell people, if you ever feel like you're going through something, always seek professional help, always see a doctor, and don't ever just brush it to the side and try to heal yourself or something. But always get, several opinions. You don't have to always be boxed in to whatever is being told to you, but I always want to make a disclaimer to anyone who watches the show, always seek professional help. With that said, you understanding your profession, how important it is for people like you to share your knowledge with patients. If someone's watching and listening to this and they feel like they need help navigating, getting to the right doctor, what words of wisdom would you share with them to encourage them to make sure that they do their homework as best they can?
I have an exercise I have my patients do who are really troubled, and it sounds really simple, but it's very hard. I tell them to look in the mirror and do this every day, and lean over, go into the bathroom, turn on the light, lean over towards the mirror so you're like 2 inches from the mirror. Look into your eyes unflinchingly and talk to the 2-year-old that we all are. We all have a 2-year-old inside of us, and say, I love you, and I'll never abandon you, and together we'll get through this. We'll get through this. And so many people, they try it and they just start crying. They just can't do it. But it's when they do it, it's life-changing. That simple, tiny action is life-changing because you're showing love for yourself. And when you do that, you'll find the right path. See, with the psychiatrist, he helped me I love myself for the first time in my life. I realized I was a good person. He helped me with that. But you can do it yourself with this simple. You try it. It's not as easy as it sounds. And you make unflinching contact with your eyes in the mirror, unflinching. And you say with all your heart, I love you. I'll never abandon you. And together, we're going to get through this. We're going to find the way. We're going to do it.
That's great, because I've heard people say, how you see yourself is how you're teaching others to see you. And I think that holds a lot of weight, because if you don't believe that you can get through it, my guess is that you're going to start taking actions that's going to mirror that way of thinking, that belief system that you have. And a lot of times when you start surrounding yourself with people who you can look up to and aspire to be like, and learn the ropes, so to speak, then they challenge you to see that hard truth. And I think that mirror exercise is a great starting point, because until you can actually face your reflection.
Yeah. Unflinching. I mean, I have patients who go like this. They just can't do it. They can't do it. I guess because they were treated so badly as children or something. They just can't. They try, and then they just start crying. Yeah.
If we're all honest, we've been there before. And I think that exercise also symbolizes truth. And until you face that truth, you'll always be in the shadows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, with that said, listen, I Am Refocused Radio, watching this online, talking to our guest, Dr. Elliott. I know you have a website for our viewers and listeners. If someone wants to connect with you and find out all the other resources you have in your other books, what's the best website they can go to?
There's 2 websites. One is my book platform. And even if you're not interested in the books, it has a lot of photos that I think you'd enjoy, and short videos that I think you'd really enjoy. Like one is about a mountain lion encounter I had, that sniffed me while I was in my sleeping bag. And that's Erica Elliott with 2 L's and 2 T's, Erica with a C, EricaElliottMD.com. I think you'll find it really interesting. And it's a way to contact me too. And then there's a blog I've been writing for the last 11 years. And it's called Musings with an S, Musings, Memoir, and Medicine, all one word. And it's there you'll find a lot of medical information that you don't learn from your doctors. I do blogs, like people who want to see me, and I'm too full up and I'm not taking new patients, they say, can you write about mammograms or something? Can you write about cholesterol or something? And it's not the mainstream dogma. It's telling the truth about these things and not the corporate truth, the real truth. And so that might be useful. Also, it's memoirs. It's some of them have turned into books. And then travel, like patients have given me these huge gifts, like trip to Antarctica, to Bhutan, and stuff like that. I have everything from the destitute who've lost their job and to the very wealthy and minor celebrities. But anyway, and then you'll find healthy recipes. So it's a mélange of different things. But the medical posts, you'll learn a lot from those.
I gotta ask this last question before we sign off. Is everyone, by disclaimer, not everyone, but most people are always searching for answers for best ways to start living a healthier lifestyle. Pay attention to what they eat, how they exercise, how they navigate life. You as a doctor with all these years underneath your belt as experience dealing with patients and all the studies and research that you've done over the years, what is one simple thing that people can pay attention to?
Okay, I'll tell you. It's the foundation of all our health, and it's what we're the worst at. It's what we eat. That's where it begins. Unless you've got something, mold problem or something, that has to be tended to immediately. But unless you're in an emergency, that's where you start. You change your diet. Get rid of the seed oils. Get rid of the ultra-processed food. Get rid of the bad fats. Switch to the good fats. Try to eat as much organically grown food as possible. If you eat animals, make sure they're not factory farmed. That's disgusting. It's cruel. It's disgusting. It's unhealthy. Make sure your animals are happy, including chickens. And one way you can tell if the chicken was raised healthy is you eat the eggs. If they're bright orange, the chicken had a good life digging around and digging for worms. If it's yellow, the chicken did not have a good life. It was just, and they say organic chicken. That just means the grain is organic. It doesn't mean the chicken had a good life. It's very misleading, the marketing. We have a health food store that is very trustworthy. They don't go in for the false marketing. And we have 6 health food stores, and there's one that is really conscientious, and they do deep research for what they sell. And so I would the best thing to do is start with the food. We have an atrocious diet in America. It's really horrible. And this is so hard to comprehend, but we are the sickest nation in terms of chronic illness in the entire world. And food has a lot to do with it. It's not the only thing. There's tons of things that are harming us, like pesticides and other things, but food is the place to start.
Once again, been listening to Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest today, Dr. Erica Elliott. Like always, want to say to you, appreciate your time talking to us on the show today.
Thank you. I enjoyed being with you, and you do such good work. I think you're doing a huge service to humanity with what you're doing.